Do you trust your friends? I mean, do you really trust them? If you think you do, you should try to play among cultists, because all of a sudden you realize that, well, maybe you can't trust them that much as you thought. This game will have you rethinking everything your fellow players does. This is a deduction game that is about you either being an investigator trying to take out the cultist or a cultist walking among the investigators and trying to take out the investigators. This is a 4 to 8 player game from 45 to 90 minutes, of course all depending on how many people are playing this game. You can play this game in a basic mode, that is the one I'm going to show you today, but you can also add different roles into this game, where you have, for example, assassins, fire starters, the seer, and everything among the investigators and the cultists as well. But the game I'm going to show you today is the basic version, just to get the idea of how this game actually works. I'm going to show you the setup of the game, and I'm going to go through how the rules work and what you can actually do in the game. So let's take a look at that. First we need to set up the player decks. And remember, you need to set up for the players but also for the cultist. And depending on how many players you are in the game, you need a different amount of cards. Here we have some root cards, alive cards, dead cards, success, failure, and sabotage cards. Now we need to put these together depending on if it's a player or cultist deck. But first, we need to shuffle the root cards, looking like this. We put them face down and shuffle them real good. Then we need to put them face down on the table in front of us, side by side. Then we need to take each investigator and cultist decks and shuffle them real good as well. When we have shuffled each of the player decks, we put them face down on top of each of the 5 root cards. We do not assign the decks to the players just yet, but we need to remember which deck is the cultist deck. Now we need to put out one role marker on top of each of the 5 decks. These are the basic roles that has no special abilities. The investigators has an M and the cultist has the tentacles. There are also other roles in this game that has special abilities, but for your first game it's recommended that you use the ones that are just plain. We put the cultist marker on top of the cultist and the rest of them on the investigators. Now we flip them over. Then we need to bring the envelopes, and now we put each deck, including the role marker, into their own envelope. When we have put all the decks and role markers into the envelopes, we now need to shuffle the envelopes, so we don't know which ones are the investigators and which ones are the cultists. Now we randomly give out the envelopes to each player. Still, we keep them closed. Now each player chooses a character that they would like to portray as, and they put them with their alive side up in front of them, meaning the one with the heart, and not the other side with the ghost. We start by placing out the board in the center of the table. Just be aware, because this board is double-sided, and depending on how many players you are, you should have certain sides up. This is a 5-player game, so we have this side facing up. Then we need to shuffle the starting room cards. We have some successes, some failures, and sabotages here. And again, depending on how many players you are, you need to shuffle different amount of cards. Then we place one card face down on each of the different rooms. We also need to create a draw pile. Again, this is depending on how many players you are. We take these cards and we shuffle them and place them face down next to the map. Next we need to prepare an unsafe passage deck. This consists of 1 success and 1 failure. These should also be shuffled and placed on top of the broken window. Next we need to take all the players' discs looking like this, corresponding with the character that you have chosen before, and place them in the hallway, the one with the big M. And we need to place them face up with the heart and not the dead ghost side. Next we take the 3 cultist tokens and put them face down. Then we shuffle them around and we put them outside of the university on the 3 spots. We take the nasty looking fisherman and put him out in the lake. We also need to take the light, which has 2 sides, one where it is turned off and one where it is turned on. And we need to put this one in the red room. You need to put the vote token face up on the blue room. Then we need to check the rulebook to see how many event tokens, looking like this, we should fill the black bag with. We then need to take the clock, this is the turn order bar for the game, and take the clock pointer and point it at number 1, indicating round 1. Then we need to take this red little marker here and put it on 0 on the victory track, along with the index finger indicating how far this game will go. In this case, to victory point 10. Now we need to fill the table with books. In each room you have some empty spots where you will place the books. Now we need to place out some room tokens in all the rooms where there are question marks. These should be shuffled face down with the cross up and placed out with the cross facing up in all the rooms. The starting player will get the first player token, which is a knife, but also this face token, putting it with the figure facing up. We need to take the portal token and put that one next to the draw deck, next to the table, and now we start the knight phase. So that was the setup of the game. Again, depending on how many players you are, the setup will look a bit different. And we also have more roles in this game that I'm showing you now. We have seers, we have fire starters, we have assassins, and so on. But for now, let's just do the basics, right? The investigator's role in this game is of course to identify and take out the cultist, or reach the score that they need to win the game. The cultists, on the other hand, their role is of course to take out the investigators one by one without ever being identified. Now we still don't know our roles, remember, because they are locked up in this envelope. And after we have done the setup, we need to do a night phase. The night phase is only done once in this game, and it is right after we have done the setup. In the night phase, this is where we get to open the envelope to see which role we actually have. We need to keep these cards face down, and we cannot look at the bottom card yet. We put the deck in front of us, and now we get to look at our little token to see if we are investigators or if we are cultists. Now, we should of course not show this to anyone else than ourselves. Once we know the answer, we take the little token and we place it next to our character's portrait. If we ever get confused during the game, we are of course allowed to take this up and look again just to remind ourselves what the hell we are. Now we do the night ritual. And again, depending on how many players you are, or if you have the seer in the group, we do different types of rituals. But for now, this is a 5-player game, so we simply go on by the standard one. Close your eyes, reveal your fate. Many a life might fade to grey. Sisters, brothers, take a look at the prey the old one took. The cult now know its return, and for all the time is due. That was the night phase. This is done once after the setup. Then we don't do the night phase no more. Now the cultists know who is alive and who is dead. And if we have more than one cultist, they also know who is their fellow cultists. If we would have been playing with a seer, they would now know who the other cultists are. But now we are ready to start playing the game. This game is played out during 4 different phases. The first one is the movement phase. But first we need to figure out who is the first player. The first player is whoever had a nightmare lately. I have nightmares all the time. So I am the first player, and I get the knife, which is a pretty cool first player token, and I also get this little token here. And I should put this with the little fellow stating up, indicating that we are in the movement phase. During a player's turn, they can do 3 movements. Starting from the first player and counting clockwise, all players perform 1 movement. But you can use up to 3 movement points during your character's turn. You cannot start your turn and end it in the same room, meaning that during your turn you need to move at least 1 step. As you can see on the map here, each room has a door or a hallway connecting them. If you move from one room to another, that is considered to be 1 movement. You move from one room out to a hallway, that is also 1 movement. You can move back and forward if you want to, but as I said, you cannot end up your movement in the room that you started. You received a route at the start of the game. These routes will determine which type of rooms you can use during which turns. Meaning that Steffa here can use the blue and the green room during turn 1, 5 and 9. So the movement phase is where we get to move around our little character tokens here on the board. Whenever we cross a room, that is 1 movement, and we can do up to 3 of those during our turn. But we need to do at least 1 movement. And it is a good thing for you to keep an eye on your route cards, because remember, you can only use these room actions during these turns. Meaning that if you miss out on this, well, you might miss out on opportunity to use that room's effect. This is not the same as your character actions. You can use your character actions at any turn. These route cards here are only stated for the rounds of which you can use the room actions. If you are dead, meaning that if you are a ghost, you actually do not use movement points to move. No, you simply teleport to the room or location you would like to go. And if you are a cultist, you do not need to pay attention to these route cards. But just be careful, because if you end up using the same room effect over and over again, well, the investigators might sniff something out and start to ask you unpleasant questions. Once all the players have done their movements, we need to see if any encounters occurs. If the power supply is on and 2 investigators are in the same location, an encounter will happen. But if the power supply is on and 3 or more investigators end up in the same location, an encounter will not happen. If the power, on the other hand, is off and 3 or more ends up in the same room, an encounter will happen. Now, each player that is involved with the encounter takes 1 alive or 1 dead card and places it on top of the other player's deck. Now, it's not said who gets to go first here, so you will simply have to get along. When we have done the movements and any encounters, the first player simply gets the little token back here, and we step into phase number 2. This is the event phase, and we now need to draw some events. We need to draw 1 event from the bag and then resolve its effect immediately. After we've done that, we place it in the current round on the round tracker where we're at. Some of these events will trigger new encounters. With the events taken care of, we now move into phase number 3, and this is the action phase. Now we need to flip this little token here over to the cogwheel. And again, the first player gets to go first, then the players to the left, and so on in clockwise order. During a player's action turn, they can do 1 character action or 1 room action. But they could also choose to do nothing at all and simply pass. If you are in the same location as another living character, or if you are in a room that has a camera, you can choose the action check a state. If you have the right requirements, you get to check the state of another player by taking up their pulse stick and looking it through. in secret of course. Now, if there's only alive cards in this deck, you simply take it and then you put it down on the table again. But if you find a dead card in this deck, you need to be truthful about it if you are an investigator. Then you take this card and you put it face up on that character's deck. Now that character sadly becomes a ghost. They're not out of the game yet, they're still a part of the game, but they are dead. But if you are a cultist, you can choose. If you want to say the truth and show that they are dead, well, you do that. But if you do not want to say the truth, well, you simply just put the deck back down again and continue playing. Once we have checked the state, we need to take the top card from the draw deck next to the table and put it on top of the room deck that we are in. If this deck had 3 or more cards from the first time, we need to flip the room token around and then do its effect. If you're located in a hallway, you can choose to secure the hallway, meaning that you should take 1 success card and 1 sabotage card and also 1 failure card. And then you should shuffle this into the unsafe passage deck. Remember the deck that was placed on top of the broken window. You take these cards and then you shuffle it in that deck. Now there's never cards placed in the hallways. The hallways are simply used to get cards into the unsafe passage deck. If you're in the same location as a cultist, you can choose to fight a cultist. You do this by simply removing that token from the game. If you enter a hallway occupied by the fisherman and you have the knife, meaning that you're the first player, you can choose to scare away the fisherman and put him back in the lake. Now, that was the character's actions that you can do. But we also have the room actions, remember? And you, as an investigator, can do a room action if you are in the correct room at the correct round, remember? But if you are a cultist, well, you can do these actions whenever you feel like it. But again, just be cautious not to do it too many times, because people are going to wonder what the hell you're doing. Depending on which room you are standing in, there will be different actions for you available. So let's take a look at them. The first room action we can choose is to fill the room deck. And you can of course do this action in any room on the map. When you do this action, you choose if you want to put a success, a failure, or a sabotage card into the room deck. All depending on which type of role you have, of course. If you're an investigator, you would want to put successes here. If you're a cultist, well, you would of course want to put failures or sabotage cards into this deck. When this deck has 3 cards for the first time, we need to flip this token to indicate that now this room has been explored. If we draw a token with the warning triangle, we need to draw the top card from the unsafe passage deck. But first we need to shuffle the deck. And depending on which card we draw, different things will happen. A failure, for example, then you need to flip 1 face down cultist token and place it in the room shown on the token. If there are no more face down tokens, the fisherman will move to the hallway at the top right between the light blue and the pink room, or to the central hallway. But if you instead draw a sabotage, the fisherman will move to the top right between the light blue room and the pink room, or to the central hallway. In both of these cases, if the fisherman is already in the building, nothing will happen, because things are already bad enough. And the same thing if you draw a success card. Nothing will happen and we're safe for now. If you are in a room that has been explored, meaning that you have this little green check mark facing up, you can choose to check this room. You will do this by flipping the top card of that room. And again, depending on which card you get, different things will happen. This time we were lucky. We drew a success, meaning that we actually get to take one of these books from this room and put up on the corresponding shelf on the bookshelf. And when we manage to completely fill one shelf, we will get the corresponding points standing to the left of that shelf. In this case, we will get 3 points on the victory track. When we come up to the final number, well, the investigators will win the game. So there we were lucky, but if we drew a failure, then what would happen? Well, in that case, nothing actually happens, so we can take a little breather. But if we instead draw a sabotage card, we will actually need to take one book back from the bookshelf and put it back into the room. So try not to take the sabotage ones. And this is why it's so important for the investigators and also the cultists to fill these decks up with the cards that are most beneficial for them. Once per round, you can choose to initiate a vote. To do this, you need to be alive. You need to be standing in the light blue room, the cafeteria, and you need to be the first player. To initiate a vote, you simply say that you would like to initiate a vote. Now we all discuss around the table. We can do accusations, we can say what we think, we can say what we don't think if we are cultists, for example, but we cannot show anything from our board. But we could pretty much lie about anything if we want to. When we're all done, and it might be a good idea for you to set a timer on this, otherwise it could take some time to do these discussions. But when we all are done and we're ready to vote, we simply do the voting by closing our eyes, putting out our fists in the middle of the room and pointing at whoever we think is the cultist. When we're all done, we simply open our eyes and then we start to count the votes. If one person is pointed out more than anyone else, well, that person is now eliminated. And they have to flip their little player token here to the dead side. But also flip their board to the dead side. Now, they are not out of the game. They can still play the game, but they cannot do the same actions as the living players. They can still move around on the board, they can still check a room, but they cannot do any room actions. If the person who were eliminated actually were the cultist, they do not need to say it, unless they are the last cultist in the game. Then they would need to say it, and sadly the cultists have lost the game. And you can also choose not to be a part in the vote, by keeping your fist closed during the voting. The first player actually may change his or her vote, even after the votes have been counted. When the voting is done, we simply flip this vote token face down, showing that now we cannot vote more during this round. If you're standing in the red room and the power is off, you can use an action to turn the power on. In the red room, you can also choose to use the camera. You can use this camera to check the state of one explored room or one living character of your choice. If they're in a room, put the top card of the draw pile on top of that room deck face down. If the character is standing in a hallway, put the card from the draw pile face down on top of the unsafe passage deck instead, and shuffle it. If the portal is opened and you are standing with another living character inside of the green room, you can choose to use both of these actions from these characters to close the portal. If you manage to close this portal within 3 rounds from it has been opened, the investigators now only need 1 score less to win the game. But if you on the other hand do not manage to close this portal within 3 turns, you now need to score 1 more point instead. So when this bad boy opens, make sure to close it. And that's the way the game goes on. Each player will take their turn, do their action, either a character action or a room action, until the investigators hopefully manage to reach their victory point, and then the investigators win the game. Or if they manage to figure out who is the cultist and take them out, then the investigators will also win. But the cultist can of course win this game as well, if they manage to sabotage and stop the investigators before they hit their victory number. They win. If there's only 1 cultist in the game and they manage to take out 3, or more investigators, they will win the game as well. Or if you are playing with a seer and the cultists think that they have figured out who is the seer, they can also say at the end of the round that I think that I know who the seer is, point at the person they think is the seer and hopefully be right. And you need to make sure that you're right, because if you're not right, well then you lose immediately. And that is how you play Among Cultists. On a base level. Like I told you, there are many different ways of making this game even harder. You could add, for example, roles to the characters. Meaning that they will have a special little ability stating at the bottom of their little token here, giving them extra abilities that they can use during their gameplay. They can have a seer as well, as I told you before in the start. You can have assassinators in this game, fire starters, everything to make this game even bigger and more epic. I have tried the basic game and let me say it just drove me completely mad. And I loved it. It was in a good way, believe me. You never really know who to trust. You never really know if you're actually focusing on the right person. And you never really know if the things that you're doing is actually contributing to the better good or just the evil. And you really can't trust anyone in this game. Which is just a lot of fun, because this is kind of a messed up way to do co-op and get the blood pumping amongst your player group. And you really need to make sure that you are using these cards in the right way to reach your goal. And it is not always easy, but to be able to take these cards and put them into different rooms or the unsafe passage deck, and then being able to activate that room at the same time, bringing this card up to the surface and getting the success or the failure that you need to win the game, that is pretty crucial. And also a quite cool way of you to putting up different strategies on how you want to win. And depending on if you are an investigator or if you are a cultist, that is a big difference. So the game I have here in front of me is of course a prototype, but it's a well-made prototype and I quite like the artwork. You have these realistic characters here. Also on these little tokens here you have cool little portrait with cool little players that you can play as. The board itself looks like real rooms. The artwork is not that cartoonish. They have gone for the realistic style here, and I think that this is just the way to go in a game like this. It really gives you the feeling that you are inside of this university trying to figure out what the hell is going on. The gameplay itself in this game, it's quite cool. I mean, there are a few things you can do, even if you're just playing the base game without the extra roles. You can do a lot of things in this game. And being the cultist is quite a challenge, because you have all eyes on everything you do the whole time. So you really need to plan ahead and not try to do too obvious things that will point the fingers directly at you. I mean, you want to take out the other players, but you do not want to be too aggressive about it, and you don't want to make it too obvious either, so you really need to plan ahead. And the whole system here, when you're picking up little books from the rooms and place it out on the shelf to get scores, are also a quite neat little thing. Because as a cultist, if you do not start to pick up books at some point, people are starting to get a bit anxious about what you actually are about and start to ask you some difficult questions. Which means that every now and then, well, the cultist will probably have to do something to actually benefit the investigators instead of themselves. Also, these big thick pugs here are a quite cool little feature. I mean, on one side you have the alive character, and on the other side, well, you are a ghost. And it's a cool thing because some of you will probably start this game dead. That was Among Cultists, a deduction game where you either get eaten by cultists or the cultist gets eaten by you. Or killed, or eliminated, or however you want to say it. This is a game from Good Games and it will be out on Kickstarter in January. If you want to know more about this game, there will be links down in the description, so be sure to check that out. I thought that this game was a lot of fun, stressful at some points, but also a challenge, especially if you are the cultist. I'm just gonna say that. I thought that was quite hard to either figure out what I was gonna do next without exposing my cover. But like I told you, if you want to know more about the game, there will be links down in the description, so check that out. If you liked the video, well, give me a thumbs up, throw in a comment there for me, subscribe to the channel, whatever you like to, or just say hi, that's fine by me. Most important is, until next time people, please keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have.